Hi, my name is Taryn McFarland, and I'm here today presenting my Capstone Integrative Studies senior thesis. I've titled it An Interdisciplinary Approach at Understanding the Roles of Community Organizations and Their Coordination in Regards to Human Trafficking in Texas. I chose to research this complex issue of human trafficking because I felt that if there were a cause, that I may potentially be able to have a positive impact by gaining as much knowledge about the subject matter, that it would be this one. I am currently a paraprofessional and a coach at a Texas public school, and because of the nature of the profession, I believe that other teachers and myself are in a community organization that has the ability to identify potential trafficking victims given the right training and information. First, I would like to introduce some of the key factors and talking points of this complex issue. You're likely familiar with the idea of trafficking. The rhetoric will sound repetitive when I state some of the facts. However, that is often the extent of the lay knowledge on the subject. The lack of knowledge is only one of many factors in play, leading to the prevalence of the spread of trafficking. A 2016 report by the International Labor Organization in 2017 actually estimated that 40.3 million people were victims of modern day slavery, which is another topic that they bring up a lot in the research, is that it is a modern day version of slavery. 25% of those people affected out of the 40.3 million are children. Commonly, victims are subjected to emotional and physical abuse, forced substance abuse, torture, coerced to perform sexual acts, and in some cases, these are all resulting in death. Trafficking occurs where vulnerability exists. Children, financially challenged, isolated individuals. With the extreme increase in accessible online content, such as applications, chat rooms, social media, escalating the ability for our youth to be groomed into being trafficked. Some of the unique factors of COVID-19 have also brought with the pandemic loss of financial security, which are all increased incentives that we need to better understand how our community health and safety organizations should coordinate efforts to prevent and intervene appropriately in human trafficking cases. Throughout my paper, I've used the term community services. I use this term loosely as I've thought that it best describes entities within a community that are commonly expected to provide needs and services such as community members that are within the area. Otherwise, these are the disciplines in which my paper is based, because they've even have established schools of thought and possible common insights and schema overlap. I've chosen to look more closely in the areas of police organizations, specialized task force, healthcare organizations, and while also acknowledging that employees of a school district are another avenue that would provide adequate research. Additionally, I chose to narrow the scope of my research to specific areas within Texas, utilizing Human Trafficking and Vice Unit, which is a specialized task force within the Austin Police Department. Circling back to my profession as an educator, in some cases, trafficking individuals, often minors, continue to live apparently normal lives, which means a teacher or a nurse or a school social worker are more likely to cross path with these individuals before it escalates to an obvious law enforcement intervention. Without a multidisciplinary team across a variety of professional backgrounds with better training, enhanced education on the truths regarding trafficking, and coordinated intervention, people who could be rescued as they're just being groomed, or even those who have been just exploited extensively, may have already been missed or slipped through the cracks. Appropriate training on the topic may help confronting potential bias, often demonstrated by law enforcement entities, in regards to possible trafficked victims who may legally be appeared to resemble perpetrators of a crime, therefore criminally charged, further perpetuating their trauma, and also missing an opportunity for a positive intervention and provision of resources. Research also confirms that human trafficking definitions are very ambiguous among police, commonly lack the training and experience necessary to identify these crimes. A little bit more about the Austin Police Department and their task force. In a proactive and reactive effort to combat the human trafficking population, evidence is clear that it must be approached across many disciplines and specialized professionals. The Central Texas Human Trafficking Task Force is a statewide multidisciplinary group working collaboratively to identify victims of trafficking. Through their investigations, they're able to prosecute traffickers. This is information geographically specific to Central Texas. However, it is headed by the U.S. Attorney's Office and it consists almost entirely of all law enforcement professionals. One of the terms that I came across in the research that I went through were that trafficking hotspots have been identified. Statistics demonstrate increased number of trafficking in areas where studies are conducted result in labels such as this word hotspots. However, researchers believe that trafficking happens wherever there are people and spikes are identified where research is funded and conducted studies are held. The ability for these agencies and coordinate efforts to identify trafficking victims to provide services is paramount in the disruption of the harm caused to victims. Given that hotspots can be identified, whether they be considered hotspots because adequate identification and funding is available in those locations, or simply because the human trafficking is so prevalent, once they are identified, the success of these coordinated efforts can be expanded. The ability to identify and treat victims of human trafficking could be achieved more efficiently if there were more comprehensive data available to healthcare workers and other frontline members of the community services, such as police officers and social workers, including myself and other educators, seeing as we see the population, the younger members of the community, student wise, those that are affected by human trafficking, 25% being that same age range. Further investigation in this complex issue, the tame nature of it is in fact less apparent. A more and more wicked problem emerges even where effective task forces are established and areas are deemed hotspots, with multifaceted efforts made to combat the human trafficking problem. Hotspot areas could easily be average depictions of human trafficking, demonstrating an even larger problem than originally thought, a wicked problem offering no definitive answer for the complex problem. To conclude, despite the current inadequacies of attacking this global issue, it does appear that well-trained, educated, and funded interdisciplinary approach is best counter for curbing the extent of the human trafficking pandemic. While doing my research, I didn't really delve into the political aspect of the disciplines regarding human trafficking. It's not one of the areas that I study with my degree, but I did think that it was a good topic for additional discussion. Maybe for some of you that are trying to make a comment on the bottom of my discussion board post, the and some of the statements that I wrote down to speak about were that political fervor drives a good deal of the bias that we have, and many might label human trafficking as a global issue that's driven by immigrants or countries other than our own. However, this bias is completely unfounded. Immigration status, cultural diversity, and language barriers are areas in which there is additional training and advancement within the knowledge base for those trafficking identifications. With a greater understanding and training, these politically founded biases can be reduced and will have a less of a negative impact in the adequate identification of trafficked victims and their consequent victim services that they're able to be provided by those community groups that I spoke about. I've found that conflicting insight due to the geopolitical firestorm regarding immigration policy could prevent the support necessary for all victims of human trafficking. Many human trafficking victims, even those in Texas and centralized areas, are recent arrivals to the United States. They're frequently identified from their actual lack of identification, their distrust for those that are around them, their inability to move from job to job or their place of residence, this conflicting overlap of discipline, perspective, and the trafficking, the inability to move or leave their jobs, this conflicting overlap of the disciplines has led to an actual Trafficking Victims Protection Act, answering by establishing a T visa, which actually allows certified victims of trafficking to become temporary residents of the U.S. It authorizes up to 5,000 victims of trafficking each year to receive permanent resident status as 3 years from the issuance of their temporary residency visas. This law also makes victims of trafficking eligible for the Witness Protection Program. And I got that information from the Austin, Texas government online, one of the links provided through the Austin Police Department. But anyways, I didn't really go into a lot of the political side in my paper, but I did think that knowing that some other people have that area of study in their degree, that it might be something interesting to comment on in the discussion board post. But I do believe that human trafficking has a lot to do with the political aspects and COVID-19 overlap and a lot of other government-based issues that don't really touch on some of the things that I actually spoke about in my paper. But that's all I have for you, and I wish everybody the best of luck for the rest of the year.